Welcome to Life Unpacked, the weekly podcast designed to help you navigate the everyday with more clarity, purpose, and intention. In each episode, we take the challenges, questions, and experiences that shape our lives and unpack them layer by layer. Through honest conversations and elevated perspectives, we explore practical insights that can help you grow, think differently, and create a better, more fulfilling life. So whether you're looking for direction, inspiration, or simply a moment to pause and reflect, Life Unpacked is your space to reset and rise. Together, we'll dig deep, open up new ways of seeing the world, and empower you to live each day with more confidence, balance, and meaning. So, what if there is a more grace, a second wave of favor designed not just to cover your past, but to empower your future? Today, we're looking at the anatomy of God's grace. We're diving into the difference between the full cup of salvation we already possess and the overflowing grace that depends on how we show up today. If you've ever felt like your spiritual life was stuck in a cycle of just being grateful for the past without feeling power for the present, this episode is for you.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping into a sermon excerpt that really tackles something many of us consider settled theology.
It really does.
The unconditional nature of God's grace. But this speaker, they take a pretty controversial turn, suggesting there are not one but two types of grace.
That's right. We're looking at a very nuanced argument that comes mostly out of the book of James, chapter 4, verse 6.
God resists the proud but gives grace to the humble.
Exactly. And that single verse is the launch pad for this whole discussion that forces you to distinguish between what the speaker calls completed grace and more grace.
Okay, let's unpack that right away, because that phrase, more grace, it creates some serious theological friction, doesn't it?
It does.
So our mission here is to clearly define these two types of favor, and then, and this is the crucial part, understand the speaker's warning against letting gratitude become the only reason for our obedience.
Because the sermon argues that mindset can actually, it can nullify the power of grace.
The core of the argument, then, is that while the initial saving grace is totally free, finished on the cross, the ongoing future favor of God, that more grace, it requires something from us now. An action rooted in hope for tomorrow, not just thankfulness for yesterday.
Precisely.
So let's start with that initial sticking point. I mean, if grace is unmerited favor, and we all know 2 Corinthians, my grace is sufficient for you, why on earth would any believer need to pursue more grace?
And that is the tension the speaker dives right into. The sufficiency of grace in that verse, he argues, refers to God's completed work. The initial justifying grace that saves us.
So it's enough for salvation.
It's absolutely sufficient for salvation.
Yeah.
But the Bible, he says, doesn't stop there.
Meaning, if God inspired James to write, he gives more grace, it must be talking about something different from that sustaining grace we already have.
Exactly. And that brings us to grace type 1. Unconditional favor. Completed grace. This is the definition we all know. Unmerited, finished on the cross, already given. A pure gift.
But then you look at that verse in James again, and it outlines a cause and effect.
It does, a condition and a consequence.
Yeah.
God resists the proud, and God gives grace to the humble. This takes us right to grace type 2. Conditional favor. The more grace.
And the condition is right there. You have to be humble to get it. This humility actually produces the more grace.
Yes.
It's fascinating that the speaker is so clear that this future grace isn't something that was just automatically finished when Christ died.
It's the difference between the gift and continued access to blessing. The conditionality isn't about earning salvation that's free. It's about accessing that next level of favor. Choose pride, you get resistance. Choose humility, you get more grace.
Now, for anyone listening, this distinction can sound a little dangerously close to earning God's favor through works. How does the speaker use Scripture to back this up, to show conditionality as a New Testament thing?
He uses a few examples to show that a condition on a future blessing is a pretty standard biblical pattern, even within grace. He's arguing conditions don't cancel grace, they just define the path to getting the future expression of it.
Okay, let's take the first example from John chapter 6. Jesus says, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall never hunger.
The speaker uses a simple framework here. The phrases, he who comes to me, or he who believes in me. Those are the present actions, the conditions.
Things we have to do right now.
Right. And the guarantee, shall never hunger, that's the future result, the blessing.
So that future satisfaction depends directly on the present action of believing. It's not automatic. It requires a response.
Exactly. And he points to Romans 8:28, a verse people often quote out of context. All things work together for my good. But it doesn't stop there.
Right, there's a qualifier.
It's to them that love God.
Yeah.
There's the condition, a clear condition placed on that future promise.
This framework, past, present, future, it seems really important.
It is. The past is the completed grace from the cross. The present is faith, the action of believing now. And the future is hope, the more grace. The whole point is to show that we live in the present, using faith now to access the grace stored up for us in the future.
So we've set up that this idea of conditional future grace exists. Now we get to the really controversial part. Why is basing our obedience only on gratitude considered so dangerous?
The speaker gives three main problems that happen when gratitude is the only thing driving you. And the first one is that this kind of obedience, it becomes a sort of a subconscious attempt to pay God back.
And he quotes Romans, who has given a gift to God that he might be repaid?
And he's very clear. You can't pay God back. It's impossible. If your obedience is just driven by thankfulness, you're trying to do something you can never finish. You're trying to return value for an infinite gift. It just sets up this exhausting false debt in your mind.
And problem two kind of flows from that, right? You turn grace into a trade.
Yes, and the analogies he uses here are really powerful. The example of inviting someone to dinner. The dinner is a gift.
Right.
But if the guest immediately says, okay, I have to buy you dinner next week now, the gift is suddenly just a transaction.
Or like if someone serves you food and you jump up feeling like you have to wash the plate, you're trading the gift of service for an action. The moment you try to repay, you sort of nullify the gift itself.
Which leads to his big theological point.
Yeah.
When you try to repay God's grace with works motivated only by thankfulness, you nullify the grace of God.
And what does that mean exactly? To nullify it?
He points to Ephesians, where the whole purpose of grace is to the praise of the glory of his grace. If you try to pay it back, you shift the glory from God's free gift to your human effort.
So by trying to make ourselves worthy after the fact, we kind of defeat the purpose of grace, which was to show God's goodness without any regard for our worth. We deflect the glory.
Precisely. We try to insert ourselves into a system that was built entirely to glorify the one who gave the gift.
And that leads to the third problem, which might be the most important one: overlooking future grace.
This is all about the direction you're looking. Gratitude, it's Thanksgiving, right? And Thanksgiving always makes you look backward at what you've already received.
You can't really be thankful for something that hasn't happened yet.
You can't. So if your obedience is based only on what God has already done for you, you're kind of limiting God to the past. That's where he uses that umbrella analogy.
All right.
If God gave you an umbrella on Friday and you're obedient just because you're grateful for that umbrella, you're stuck on Friday's storm.
But then a new storm comes on Sunday.
A bigger storm. And if your motivation hasn't shifted to faith for the future, you're not ready. You're basically telling God, this grace you already gave me, this umbrella, it's all I need.
And the consequence of that is pretty stark. You're acting as if the promise of more grace just doesn't exist or isn't available to you. You're nullifying the potential for future blessing because you aren't trusting God for more.
So that brings us to the big transition. If gratitude is a dangerous soul motive because it's backward looking, what should motivate us?
And the answer is a forward-looking faith and hope. Your obedience should come from trusting God for the grace that is still to come, not just what you've already gotten.
He ties it right back to the definition of faith in Hebrews. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. Faith is what you do now in the present. Hope is the result you're anticipating in the future, that more grace.
So, to put it all together, we are saved by that completed grace through faith. But our ongoing obedience, our access to that divine overflow, is about exercising faith now to get the conditional grace stored up for the future.
Exactly. And he's careful to say this isn't an argument against being thankful. You have to be grateful. But the engine for sustained, future-oriented obedience has to be trusting God for blessings you haven't even seen yet.
To really make this difference clear between a loving response and a transactional one, he uses that parent and child analogy with the bicycle.
Right. The parent buys the child a bicycle. That's an unconditional gift. The parent didn't buy it because the kid was good. They bought it out of love. The gift itself is a sign of that unconditional love.
But if the child is only obedient because they feel like they have to work off the bike,
And then, when the bike breaks, the obedience stops.
that transactional obedience, it just belittles the gift. It shows the child cared more about the bike than the relationship with the parent who gave it.
Obedience has to be independent of the past material gift. If it's conditioned only on the past, it's a weak, temporary motive.
So the speaker wraps it all up by coming back to that core distinction, because he knows this idea of conditional grace is going to be tough for a lot of people to swallow.
The emphasis is that God's past grace is unconditional. That's the full cup we've received. But the future grace, the overflow, that's conditional. And the proof is right there in James. If you humble yourself, then I will lift you up.
That future lifting up, that more grace, it requires a current humble action. It proves that not every blessing was just automatically dispensed at the cross. It requires continuous forward-looking faith.
This deep dive really has shown us that this sermon is a powerful challenge to really look at why we're doing good.
It forces a huge distinction. Gratitude looks back at grace received, but faith-driven obedience looks forward to grace that's still anticipated.
And that you access through humility now. We've learned that obedience isn't about trying to settle some impossible debt. It's not a divine trade.
So what does this all mean for you as you're listening? We've unpacked this argument that obedience should be a forward-looking act of faith, not just a backward-looking transaction of gratitude.
Consider this final thought from the sermon. If you use the sufficiency of the grace you've already been given, that past grace, as the only reason for your obedience, are you not, maybe without realizing it, creating a boundary for what God is willing and able to do for you in the future?
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
Until next time, stay curious.
The more grace we've talked about today is available right now. It's an extra, overflowing supply for your tomorrow, but the tap is opened by humility and trust in the here and now. So, as you head into your week, don't just settle for a full cup. Aim for the overflow. Stay humble, keep trusting, and watch how that grace meets you in the future. Thanks for listening to Life Unpacked, and we'll see you next time as we continue to unpack life by the unfolding of God's Word.